Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Survive Paddy Plays. Today I'm joined by a guy who I really only found out about in the last week. But once I started looking into his stuff, I was like, how did I not know about this guy sooner? And that is Philip J Reid, who is the author of Resident Evil, part of the Boss Battle book series. And we're going to chat about how he's literally writing the book on Resident Evil. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was really since I started doing this channel, I've started to obviously get more involved in groups and communities, and as you do, you come across stuff. So I think I was part of a Resident Evil Facebook group, and I saw your post, and immediately my thought was like, okay, Resident Evil making of book, I'm 100% sold. Where do I sign up? The book will be available soonish to the general public.
Yes, we are shooting for August, and the only reason I say we're shooting is, the plague.
The world, yeah.
Yeah, there's a big question mark over a lot of things, but if all goes well, it should be shipping to people. If they back the Kickstarter, they should be getting it in August, and if they didn't, shame on them, of course, but they can still buy it through Amazon, through Boss Fight Books, however they want to do it. That'll be available in August.
Cool. It probably goes without saying, but I imagine you're a fan of Resident Evil.
Well, yes, it's funny you put it that way. It probably should go without saying. And I am currently a fan, but yeah, I was, my first experience with Resident Evil was not entirely positive. I would not have called myself a fan back then. It took me a little while to come around to its charms.
Oh, wow, cool. Okay, because that's actually cool. That leads into me actually being able to ask a question, because usually when I ask most people what's like the first horror game you remember playing, they usually go, oh, well, like either Alone in the Dark or Resident Evil. Yeah. But did you have a different experience? Like, because I'm not going to influence your answer here, but like, what was the first horror game you can kind of remember playing?
Oh my God, it's a few things come to mind. I'm not sure what the first would be. I definitely remember in an arcade playing Ghosts and Goblins, and I don't know what age I would have been, but I was very young, and you put the quarter in and instantly die because the game is so difficult. So it was not a good experience there. But an actual horror game that I spent time with was Haunted House on the Atari 2600.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, are you familiar with that? You get the little set of eyeballs and you kind of navigate them through.
Yeah,
oh God!
Yeah, I did, because the first game system that I had was an Atari 2600, and that was like not one of the first games I got with it, but it was like maybe a year after I got the Atari, we got Haunted House.
Oh, okay. I think I owned it. I don't know for a fact. It might have just been a friend's copy. The Graves Mansion. That's what it was. I was trying to remember, because there's the Spencer Mansion and what is it? The Edison Estate in Maniac Mansion. Like, it seemed like a lot of those horror games really wanted to define the setting, and it was the Graves Mansion for Haunted House.
Definitely, like the mansion kind of, yeah. It's funny because even, yeah, as you say, Alone in the Dark, the original game, I'm pretty sure that at the start of it, you go to a big mansion or manor estate anyway.
Yeah, that was the Harwood Mansion.
It definitely seemed to be, yes, the Harwood Mansion. There we go. Yeah, so like it definitely seems like, but I guess it's kind of like when people are making their first movie. It's often the case of like, hey, try and pick one location and a small cast. So if you set something in a mansion, that is one location majoritively, and you can keep your cast fairly small.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Obviously, that would keep production costs down. I don't know. Part of me wants to say it would be easier to develop as well in terms of like puzzle design and so on. I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems to me like it might be. If I were just creating puzzles for a limited set of rooms, I think I would have more confidence that I'm able to do them pretty well. If you told me I need puzzles spanning the globe, I would probably struggle quite a bit more.
Or yeah, like the whole of a city or something.
Yeah, that would be a little tougher.
Did you ever have any questions with Resident Evil? Because I did, okay? Well, you obviously did. You wrote the book on it. But in Resident Evil, like, who is this architect? Like, they call him in, they're like, hey, Bill, we got a job for you. We want you to install a statue that you put 2 gems into that will open a hidden waterway. That will, like, I just want to know what the plans look like.
No, it's totally fair. And I remember, it came out in '96, and I probably didn't play it till '97. Somewhere in that window. But I remember those were the jokes that we would make while playing it. It was a very fair question. Everyone arrived at it. And I don't know if that's why they did it, but when Capcom remade Resident Evil,
Yes.
they did include a whole side plot about who the architect was, and
Something Trevor.
yeah, it was George
Yeah.
Trevor.
George Trevor and Lisa was the daughter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's obviously two sides to that. One, it's cool, like, oh, okay, George Trevor, he designed it. He's known for these kind of oblique hidden passageways, and that's all fun. But then you have the Lisa Trevor part, his daughter, and it is not fun at all. That is a harrowing little story.
I'm still haunted by that. I think one of the reasons that I don't revisit the remake very often, even though it's phenomenal, I don't revisit it very often because it genuinely chilled me between the Crimson Heads and Lisa Trevor and all that stuff. It's still probably one of the scariest survival horror games around, just because everything is so brutal and terrifying.
Yeah, I agree totally. The Lisa Trevor stuff, when that GameCube remake came out, I did play it pretty close to release, and I was like you. Once I finished it, no more. I've seen Lisa. I've read the story. I'm finished. Obviously, that has changed over the years, but for a long time, that it lingers. That that feeling really sticks with you.
One thing I did like is that they did the whole George Trevor architect storyline, but then straight away that just opened up another question for me, which was like, did he get all the jobs in Raccoon City? Like, did he design the police station? Did he design because they all had the same kind of random puzzle setup. So I started to question, like, George Trevor must have been the busiest architect in the world. Like,
yeah,
we need to do a base in Antarctica.
He must have been. God, I can't remember offhand if the series ever connected him to the Raccoon City Police Department, but I do know later on in Resident Evil Revelations, he apparently designed the ship that you're on, and think, yeah. So I think they're every so often they just kind of explain it by saying, "Oh yeah, George did that as well," which I guess is fine. It's better than nothing.
I could get into even on my weekly news show that I do here, I was talking about Resident Evil lore only last Friday because Capcom came out and connected the Resident Evil 3 remake and Resident Evil 4, and a lot of fans were unhappy about it. A lot of fans weren't. A lot of fans thought it was cool. But I just thought, I'm so done with getting annoyed at any kind of Resident Evil lore stuff because it changes so much generally that there's no point getting angry about it.
Oh God, yeah, I agree entirely. It's funny. There's a site called Resident Evil Database, and you'll read the book and you'll see that the woman who owns that site was a tremendous help to me. So she gets a little shout out, but she posted fairly recently a little poll, and it was, how much do you care about Resident Evil lore? And I responded to the poll to, why not? And I said, not at all. And she and I were in touch about something else. And she wrote back and she says, I can't believe of all people you would say not at all. But it really is true. It's fine. I play the game. I'll follow the story. And then that's it. I don't care after that because the series has retconned itself so many times and introduced new characters with I don't know, interweaving backstories, but you never actually get to see that backstory. So I just gave up.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you. But that does actually lead nicely into one of my next questions, which is, did you ever read the S.D. Perry books?
Yes, actually.
There we go. I do, yeah. Stupid blurring background thing.
Oh.
Yeah, I still have one of them.
Oh, which one do you have? Just the first one?
Caliban Cove.
Oh, that was
the second one.
The second one, and that was her first original story. That was actually kind of cool. I did interview. Her name is, well, she goes by both names, I guess, Stephanie and Danelle. There's your SD. I did interview her for the book, and it was a really cool discussion, and I'm really glad I got to talk to her. But it didn't quite fit the flow of the book, so I had a difficult talk with my editors because I wanted to keep it, and I know I was arguing for this thing that didn't fit, but they said, let's not have it because it'll be a smoother read without it, and that was fine, and I agreed. And then they decided they could do a little anthology with a whole bunch of other content that the authors put together that just didn't make it into the books, and immediately,
fantastic.
yeah. So like we reworked the chapter a little bit because now it's a standalone piece. So we changed the introduction, the conclusion, that sort of stuff. But the conversation survives, and yeah, I think anyone who, for the Kickstarter backers, anyone who backs the entire season will get that anthology for free. So they will still get to experience that conversation. It'll just be, physically in a different place from the book.
I am very happy that I have this backed because, I don't know where the first book is. I had it long time ago. These also, I will say that these were like definitely the first novelizations I remembered from like a video game. I know there was other ones, and I know there was Doom novelizations and a load of stuff in the 90s. A Sonic, no, I tell a lie, I had a Sonic novelization, but. But yeah, these are definitely, you couldn't get them in a regular bookstore. You had to go to like a specialist store to order them in because they were super bizarre. I had to come in with the ISBN code and order it specifically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because in Ireland now they would not have been sitting on most shelves. So you had to kind of go to the specialist little booksellers and order them that way.
Oh,
I think
wow.
it was actually a merchandise shop. It was a place called Hollywood Empire, which used to sell merch. I went in and asked him. I was like, I have the ISBN number. It's like, I'll order it for you.
That's actually a little more exciting for me. I'm not trying to make you jealous, but for me, it was kind of, just a basic experience. You go to the bookstore, and I remember specifically there was like a cardboard display stand for the Resident Evil books. And I'm saying books plural, but it could have only been the first one at the time. I don't remember that specifically. But they were definitely marketed pretty openly here. So, yeah, sorry to hear that.
No, yeah. It's cool because what ended up happening as well, I got them, and a lot of my friends were Resident Evil fans at that time. So it became this like, he's got the books, man. He's got the books. Oh my God, no way. And like I was like passing people around the books, like, you better bring it back to me in good condition. Like, and then I don't know, as I say, whatever happened. I had three books. I don't know whatever happened to the first one and the third. Basically, I moved countries. I went to live in Malta in 2013, and I couldn't find any storage for my stuff, so I had to sell a lot of it. And whatever I couldn't find a home for. But as I said, Caliban Cove survived.
Well, that's good. That's actually, I like that one. I like that one a lot. I think it's because it's being a unique story. You don't really compare it to any of your memories or anything, and not that it would usually matter, but the fact that it doesn't have to demonstrate any fidelity toward a game is pretty nice. I enjoy that one. I like that one a lot.
And speaking of that kind of stuff, like merch and memorabilia and stuff, I know you said you weren't necessarily a fan of the series when it came out and stuff, but do you have any specific kind of Resident Evil merch or memorabilia that you like treasure, that's like really something you love a lot?
I do have an answer, but it's probably a boring answer. I don't really know if it is. But I have the Dreamcast versions of Resident Evil 2 and 3. I also have Code Veronica, but which is great. But that's a pretty common one. Like, I think if you go on eBay, you could get 50 of them for $1. But 2 and 3 are actually pretty hard to come by in good condition on the Dreamcast. And I do have those. I'm not trying to brag, but you asked. So those are the ones I think I would protect over all else.
I'm notoriously known, especially my wife likes to rip on me a lot about it, but I'm a total Dreamcast fanboy. I still to this day go on and on about how the Dreamcast was like sent out to die at a time that, like, if it was 3-4 years later, it would have been in the perfect place at the perfect time. But those versions are actually some of the best, like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 and the Dreamcast, because they were running on WinCE, I think. So they were actually really nice.
Yeah, they were. I actually replayed them not that long ago, probably less than a year ago at this point, just for the sake of playing through them again on the Dreamcast. And God, I don't know. there's something about it. I don't know if it's the controller or, the display settings or what, but it's such a cool experience. And the little the VMU, that little module that plugs in. Yeah, it like shows your health and your ammo, and it's totally unnecessary, and I'm so glad it's there. I just love that it's there.
The next question I have for you is just it's another horror game question, so I'm going to skip it for now. So I'm going to go to how did you come to work with Boss Battle on this book?
Well, the short, dull answer is, I wrote them a pitch every so often. I think it's every year, maybe not quite every year. They have an open pitch period where they just say, all right, tell us what you would write about. And of those pitches, they go through and they select a few. And I did that for Resident Evil. And it was a strange email I got back. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I didn't know how to process it. The email said, hey, sorry, we haven't been in touch. Give us a little more time, something like that. And I had no clue what that meant. And I showed a friend and he says, oh, no, that means you're being considered. That's good news. And after that, I talked to Gabe, who is the editor-in-chief over there. He set aside some time to talk to me on the phone, and we talked through my vision for the book, and he talked through, some of his ideas and what he would expect of me. And by the end of that conversation, we agreed. We agreed to move forward on it, and it was kind of cool.
I can only imagine. I mean, and you had been writing before that, though. Like, is it you'd been writing like online and stuff?
Kind of in both spheres. As a hobby, I've always written, and then as a career, probably since I was in my mid-20s, I've been able to write professionally, which is, it still surprises me that I can say that, and my nose doesn't grow. It's not something I ever thought I'd be able to say, but I've been lucky enough to make a living as a writer, and that's kind of cool, I think.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I myself am a screenwriter by trade, I guess, when I'm not doing this stuff, and I love writing. But it's so funny because I used to write reviews, and I grew so tired of that after about 3 years, just because. It was nothing against the writing. I love writing, but it was more the fact that I had to review everything. So like Barbie's Horse Adventure comes out and I had to review that, So,
well, I'm sorry to hear that part. Actually, one of my earliest regular writing jobs, I guess, would have been for Nintendo Life. And they review everything, and I would get, the short end of the stick a lot of the time. And that was fine. It did kind of suck that I would review Barbie's Horse Adventure instead of, being able to play Super Mario Galaxy. Like, yes. That was very irritating. But, I also kind of knew going in that would be the case, and that I was okay with that. The thing that really got me, and this is nothing against working for the site or any of the people I worked with who were fantastic. But every so often you'd write a review and you'd be really proud of it. Like you went through the whole game personally, and you came back with all of these, really great thoughts about it and all of this insight that you want to share. And you do that, and somebody replies and they say, but how big is the game? And like, it's so irritating because that they didn't read a word. They skimmed for a file size and they didn't find it. And in a way, that's okay because people have different questions and that's totally fair. But like, if all you want is some, piece of data that you can get anywhere, why are you reading this review? Like, and why are you bothering me in the comments with this? It was all. I'm getting fired up just thinking about it. But when I stopped reviewing, in that style where it was, a numerical score at the end and like it was all very formulaic. Yes. When I stopped doing that professionally, it was like a load off my mind. I don't miss it. I'm glad I did it, but I don't miss it.
I'd be the very same. And it's funny. It's so funny to hear you say what you just said a minute ago about those comments, because even since I started this channel, I've noticed that I've put up a couple of reviews so far, And every so often, you'll just get a, how long is it? And you're,
Yeah.
okay, he didn't, as you say, they did not watch the video. They did not care. They just want you to tell them something. So you're their search engine. Like, they could have just asked Google, but they're asking you.
Right. This data is out there.
It's
You know,
very
how
strange.
long is it? There's a whole site. I think it might even be called "How Long Is It?" Like, it's, this information exists, and you can find it, and you have every right to look for it. But like, don't make it seem like I left out something when I was, writing from a very different perspective. I'm trying to let you know if the game is worth playing. I think that's my
Yeah, like, you're talking about the game.
right. And like,
not speaking about the length, because
right.
no,
like,
sorry, I was just going to say, you could start up a whole new review site now where you solely review games based on their length. And so the whole review is just, this game is about 6.5 hours long, and yeah, that's basically it.
It's, yeah, and I think I don't know. There's this whole mindset that I have, and I think it came from my trauma as a games reviewer. And my mindset is that, like, a lot of people who read a game review, like, they don't know what they want. They think they do because they come and there's a question that wasn't answered. So they think that's what I wanted and I didn't get it. However, I think if I were to just answer all of those questions, the game review site would be worthless and not worth reading. It would be, number of players 2, length 15 hours, size 1.2 gigs, 6 out of 10. And and there, like, I know I did. I answered every question you were going to have, and it did you no good. Like, yeah. I really hate to say this. Well, I will say it anyway, but like, I will take myself out of the equation. Forget me. Just in general, if you're going to a reviewer, treat that reviewer as the professional. You can disagree, but like, know that you're coming to that person for an opinion. If you're not going to that person for an opinion, don't go.
I love that. I love that outlook, because, yeah, look. I noticed that. I remember back when I had my own review site back in like 2013, and I reviewed Resident Evil 6, and I was. You're probably going to be a little bit shocked to hear this, but I was one of the few people that, like, I actually liked Resident Evil 6. So I gave it I think I gave it not even a glowing review. I think I gave it, like, well, my site didn't use scores, so I just kind of in my too long didn't read thing, I was just like, it's got loads of content, and it's up to you what you enjoy out of it. But like, this part and this part are really good, and people were like, oh, this dude was paid off. This dude was definitely paid off for this review.
Yes. Okay. I have so many responses to that. So, one, in keeping with the actual topic of this episode.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Like, with Resident Evil 6, there's no correct opinion. Whatever you say, it's good, it's bad, it's neither good nor bad. It's good, but not a good Resident Evil game. Like, however you phrase whatever your opinion is, you're wrong. Like, there will be a wave of people who will let you know it. It's this weird game, where like, there's not really a consensus. And then as far as being paid off, man, I wish I were important enough that anyone would even think to bribe me. I'm not saying I would take a bribe. I am saying no one has ever in my life said, hey, give me a good review, I'll give you $50. Like, who do you think I am that anybody would care enough to influence my opinion with money? Yeah, I used to get those comments too, and it goes both ways. It was so, I don't know. Is that the way people's minds really function? That if someone else has a different opinion, you assume they were paid? I don't even understand that.
I don't either. And I've had it again very recently. This actually leads really nicely into my next question, which is, my next question is about the remakes trend. But what leads into it is that I did a Resident Evil 3 remake review, and I really liked it, which has offended so many people that I couldn't dare to like a game. But like that, straight away again, I've already started receiving this guy obviously got paid by Capcom to say this, and it's like, I am a no one.
Yeah. Capcom doesn't know you exist. And I don't say that to be rude. It's just Capcom doesn't know that most people on the planet exist. They don't care. You know, they have their job and they've released crappy games in the past and they know it, or at least games that have like, you know, performed poorly or scored poorly. They're fully aware of that. Then they just move on because they're a company. They don't bother going around paying, you know, pennies to nobodies in the hopes that they'll get a good YouTube review. That's insane.
So insane. But yeah, I mean, as well as that, like, just to kind of jump off that a little bit, is that one thing I'll say that's very impressive to me about the Resident Evil series is that it's been coming up on 25 years? Yeah, just coming up on 25 years, right?
What was it 96?
Yeah.
I'm not
so like
good at math.
Me neither. I think 2021 will be the 25-year anniversary, I think.
Okay.
But we're so writers, right?
Yeah, dude. I take offense that you asked me to do math on your program.
But they've been doing this so long, and people complain about certain entries in the series, but the thing about it is no other game series running that long, well, there's maybe one other which might be Final Fantasy, but like has reinvented itself the way Resident Evil does each generation. Like it doesn't rest on its laurels and just do the same thing over and over. Like it does for a while, but then it kicks it into gear when they need to.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And God, I'm glad you brought that up. There was a chapter in my book, and I'm hesitating because I don't know if I ever finished the chapter. It definitely didn't make it to the final draft. It was a bit of a tangent, but the fact that Resident Evil has reinvented itself so frequently is impressive because you compare it to something like Silent Hill. You know, Resident Evil, the first game came out, and then Silent Hill followed. What was it, 2 years later, something like that, and. Yeah. Immediately, and I'm not going to say if this is, you know, an opinion I share, but immediately people sort of treated Silent Hill as the smarter game. You know, it does a lot of what Resident Evil does, but it's more intelligent, you know, and it has more to say and it's deeper. And that's totally fair, whether you agree with that or not. Like, that's a fair perspective. And then how many good games followed? You know, 2, certainly. 3, yes. And that's it. You know, after that, you have people who will like apologetically maybe enjoy those games, but that's all. Whereas Resident Evil, oddly enough, the 4th game is where they totally reinvented. They didn't do a retread. And I know that the 4th game is, you know, a bit polarizing. There are people who really don't like it. There are people who think it heralded the, you know, the downfall of the series, and that's fine. But it was successful, and it was memorable, and it was important, and that's something that Silent Hill didn't do after the 3rd game. And, you know, now Resident Evil reinvented itself with 7. We'll have to see what happens next. But the fact is, they clearly took a step back and said, what can we do differently? And it paid off again. So I really am impressed at their willingness to take a formula that worked, and it worked for the previous few games, and say, we're not going to do that. We are going to do something new. I think that's why they're still around. And, you know, I don't even know. Like, I have no clue what Silent Hill is or isn't going to do in the future.
Exactly. And like the thing is, I mean, Resident Evil will always evoke a reaction from the fans when 7 was announced. My immediate gut response was, oh God, no, first person, they're going to ruin it by going down that indie horror route. They're just trying to copy whatever it was at the time, PT. They're just trying to copy like all this stuff. And then the gut punch that I felt playing Resident Evil 7 and being like, oh my God, this is the new standard of survival horror. Like they've done it again. It blew my mind how good it turned out versus what I envisioned it is in my head.
And I like the way you put that because, okay, so you said you like Resident Evil 6, and had they done a 7 in that style, it may have still been a good game. It never would have blown your mind because at that point, it would have been several games in a row with the sort of, you know, over-the-shoulder, third-person shooter action. Like, so even if you liked the next game, there would definitely be some diminishing returns in terms of enthusiasm. And I don't know, for whatever reason, Capcom or just that little team at Capcom is really smart about knowing how to get the enthusiasm back up.
Oh, big time. And I mean, yeah. to kind of go back, I'm terrible for tangents as well, just as a heads up, which you've already seen, obviously. But going back to the remakes thing, like, what do you feel? How do you feel on the remakes trend, like 2 and 3? I mean, obviously the remakes go all the way back to the one remake on the Cube, but yeah.
Well, the remake of 1 is like, it's in a class of its own. It's just a masterpiece. 2, what was it, like 2 years ago now it came out, or was that last year?
Yeah, 29. Yeah, it came out the start of last year, and then this 3 came out the start of this year. It's crazy.
Yeah, it feels much longer ago. But I really, really loved the remake of 2. And I know that people go back and forth about which one is better, the original or the remake. And again, that's fair because they're so different. I think they're both fantastic. I loved the remake of 2. 3, you know, we were just talking about this actually. It's less exciting because we just had the remake of 2. And even if we just agree, I'm not even going to say if I do or not, but even if we just agree like that 3 wasn't quite as good as 2, the fact is we already had 2 and we had it so recently that this isn't going to get everyone as excited as 2 did. And I think that that's okay. But I also think that that's maybe the time to take your foot off the gas pedal and let things settle before we do another remake. But that's just me.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's actually, I started going into this crazy speculation about Resident Evil 4 remake, because I was like, what if they did it in first person? What if they went back, like Resident Evil 4, what if they completely... If you're going to remake Resident Evil 4 and you just put it over the shoulder, you're just literally redoing Resident Evil 4 exactly. But if you went first person and you played way more with the psychological horror side of things that they were going to with Resident Evil 3.5, ooh, there could be something really interesting. And I know that that's all in my own head and I'm setting myself up for disappointment. I'm fully aware of this. But that's the kind of stuff that excites me, is just wondering what's in the future for this series.
Yeah, that's actually a good point with 4. Yes, if they remake it the same way they remade 2 and 3, it'll be similar to what we already have with 4. And on top of that, we just had 2 and 3. So like there will be double fatigue on that. I think, I don't know, I'm not a game designer, but I think you're on the right track. What you ideally could do, you could take Resident Evil 4 and treat it either like 7 or like the first game, where maybe it's still that same environment, it's still the same characters, the same story, but it has that sort of like horrific, oppressive atmosphere. And, you know, the claustrophobia. Like if you could somehow treat Resident Evil 4 that way, I don't know. I think that might be pretty cool.
I'd be, as I say, it's all these kind of questions that definitely they keep me excited. It's the reason why I've pre-ordered your book. Like every little bit of tidbit of knowledge that I can use to try and figure out this enigma that is Capcom, I will use. You know?
Yeah, it's you know, it is actually really interesting. There is not all that much information out there about Capcom. Like every so often, you'll hear something like when somebody leaves the company and they don't leave on good terms, there's going to be some interviews and some venting, and like that's about it. And now that I say that, I think that's the case with most of these Japanese developers, Konami, Nintendo, you know, a bunch of other ones. You don't really hear about the day to day. You don't really hear about people sitting down in a room and deciding how to do something. You see it when it's done, and you see it when something gets royally screwed up. And in between, there's nothing. Whereas I think Western developers, maybe it's just because I, you know, listen to and watch and read English language things, but Western developers seem to be a lot more open, where they don't necessarily tell you what their plans are, but they discuss the development process. There's a channel on YouTube called NoClip, and they do a lot of really cool documentaries about developers and games and series, and they get all these people who worked on these games like Half-Life and Assassin's Creed and all this stuff to just sit down and talk, and they do it. And I cannot imagine a group of Nintendo developers being that open about, hey, here's how we come up with our cool ideas.
It's really interesting because I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was little making of things about those type of games. Like I remember watching a making of Silent Hill back in like 98. And it had like Akira Yamaoka sitting there playing guitar and talking about like what inspired him to, and like after that, I've never seen any kind of glimpse into. It was like they released that, and somebody was like, "No, that was it. That was the last one. Now, no more, guys." But it's funny because the Final Fantasy series seems to be the only one where they are a lot more. Because I'm a big Final Fantasy fan as well.
Yeah,
and it seems to be the only one where they're a lot more vocal. Like Tetsuya Nomura is really good at coming out and talking about development plans and riling everyone up and making everyone either really angry or really excited or both, and getting them to fight off against each other for his affection.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot. I was listing all these companies that I never hear from, but fairly recently, within the past maybe 2 or 3 years, there was an oral history of Final Fantasy VII. I think maybe Polygon put it together. And it was a bunch of people, talking about how the game came together and, their dealings with Nintendo, and now they were going to go over to PlayStation. Like, it was a really fascinating and very in-depth read, and it was Final Fantasy. So yeah, maybe the folks who work on that series are just more talkative. I don't know.
I think it's because it's a series that's like so many of their games get bogged down in crazy development nonsense and stuff that, like, I think now they're trying to start being a bit more open about it just so they don't allow that to happen as much anymore. It's like, well, if we start talking about this stuff, maybe we won't sit on it for 11 years,
Right.
That might be my guess anyway. The next question I have for you there is just, I think we've definitely touched around, kind of danced around this one already anyway. We've heard little bits, but outside of Resident Evil, what would be some of your kind of other favorite horror games or horror game series?
Okay. So series, that's a little tougher. But as far as horror games, I might come back to the series answer. I'm not sure. But horror games.
Yeah, no worries.
Fairly recently, Prey. I don't know if you played that, but I thought that was a really fantastic game. That's this generation, but I think it's a few years old now. Soma as well, which...
Oh, Soma's so good.
Oh, God, isn't it? Yeah, I was almost about to apologize because, maybe it's not horror in the way most people think of horror, but that game, we spoke earlier about, like, Lisa Trevor and how she haunts you long after you played the game. Soma, it's been years since I played it. And I still think about it. I probably thought about it earlier today. Like, I cannot shake that game.
I saw a screenshot from it earlier that somebody put up as like a meme, and I literally got like kind of like PTSD flashbacks just by seeing a screenshot.
It was so good. But yeah, another one, I don't know why this didn't come to me earlier when you asked about like the first horror games I played. Again, probably not the strictest definition of horror, but Maniac Mansion. I played that.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, I played that for the Nintendo, and I absolutely loved it as a kid. I'd play it and have fun, of course, and then I'd stop playing it, and I would like take out some paper, and I would draw a map, and I would draw the things I remember. Like, something about that game, it was, horror comedy, but something about that game just, it stuck with me, and I loved, exploring that house and finding its secrets. So yeah, I would definitely put that one on my list of favorite horror games, even though now as an adult, I realize it's more of a comedy.
That's awesome, because I remember I didn't play Maniac Mansion at the time that it came out and stuff, or like around that time. What happened was when me and my friend, we got obsessed with the LucasArts adventure game, so I played Day of the Tentacle. And then within that, the arcade machine or whatever that you could access to play Maniac Mansion from inside that game was how I played Maniac Mansion. And then we were like, oh, we got to beat this. Like, we got to beat the game inside the game.
That's awesome.
It was... I loved... I mean, it was crazy because Day of the Tentacle was one of those games that you could play with no knowledge or understanding of Maniac Mansion. But then at the same time, if you did play Maniac Mansion, you got those little extra bits. To me, that's how you do any good kind of sequel. There's stuff there for old school, like people who've been involved in the series, but there's also like you can come in totally fresh. I feel like the new God of War did that as well, really well.
Oh God, yes, agreed on both counts. Day of the Tentacle is also, it's a good example of shaking up the format, even though it was only the second game. We talked about Silent Hill and everything going on for games and games. This was only the second one, but they didn't really try to recapture the original beyond maybe its sense of humor and like a few of the little Easter eggs. They could point back to the original. Like they focused, I'm sure, on just making a really good game, and that is what it should have been. I thought that was done really well. God of War, yeah, absolutely perfect example of that as well. I loved the new God of War. I think that's about as close to a perfect game as you can get. I thought that was great.
That again though, right? What I loved about playing that was I was playing it and when certain moments happened, I got that like, oh, I know exactly what that's about because I've played all the other games in the series. But I was also able to look at it and say, if somebody knew none of this, they would just go, "Well, that's cool. What are those?" Like they wouldn't have the same nostalgia, but it's also not going to throw them off with like, "Oh, you really to understand this, you need to know all the lore." They don't alienate an audience with decades of lore.
Right. That's when you were saying that, I'm picturing. This will be a spoiler, I guess. So if you're listening and you, it's a minor spoiler, but if you don't want the spoiler, skip ahead, a minute. But as you were describing that, I'm picturing the scene where he goes back to his house and he goes under the floorboards and gets his chains. And yeah, if you played the previous games, even just one previous game, I guess, that's this moment, And if you don't, I can't say for sure, but I think you probably just get the sense that like shit's about to get real.
Or like these mean something to him. Like, right. That, like,
he went back home to get these things because he's gonna bust some heads, and you don't know, the background, but you don't need to. All you need to know is that Kratos wanted those things because now he's dead serious, and I think that works either way, and I think it works just as well either way.
It's so true. I love that in this conversation we've now managed to draw a parallel between Maniac Mansion and God of War. That's all I wanted out of this conversation, actually.
Yeah, that was also my goal going in. It took a while, but we got there.
So the next question I have there is just would you have any interest or plans? Now you can say you can obviously say I'd love to do that, but no. Would you ever have any plans to write any Resident Evil fiction, or was it just to this kind of the story of the game that intrigued you?
So Resident Evil fiction specifically, I would say no. However, while I was researching the game, and you'll read it when you get to the book, I discuss other things. I talk about horror media in general. So we dip into books and poems and films and TV shows. Like we really tie a lot of things together because I think that's part of understanding what horror is. And if you look at something specific in Resident Evil, you can obviously evaluate it on its own merits, and that's fine. But maybe you can take a step back and you can kind of see where they got this from a movie, or you can kind of see where a director did something similar and Resident Evil sort of learned that lesson. So I was immersing myself in horror in general, and I wondered, I'm studying this now, as an observer, would I be able to create a horror story, like one that was actually good? And I came up with several ideas, and that's it. So I would love to try writing a horror story, but already I've fallen at about the first hurdle, because I think anyone can come up with an idea, good or not. You can think of something, and then it's all down to your execution. No pun intended.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like I don't know if I have that ability to push the idea into something anybody would care about reading.
I mean, it's crazy because as I say, make horror films as my main job.
Yeah.
And but the thing about it is that it is so. Some ideas just come and you're like, there we go, there's the idea, and I can take it from start through finish, no problem. But at the same time, like, one of the things I've learned the most, and I'm sure you know this yourself from everything you've done, is just being aware that whatever you do, not everyone's going to like it, because like, even if you wrote what you think is the best, that's why it can be so hard as well to break a story, is because you're like, oh, will this be dumb, will no one like it? But at the same time, it's like, even if it's the best thing ever, somebody will be like, this is dumb, I don't like it. So
You are absolutely correct. I don't know, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to guess what your favorite horror films are. Maybe you could tell me in a moment, but I would think of something like Night of the Living Dead or The Thing, and I'm sure I could go online and find hundreds of people talking about everything wrong with those movies. And like, I don't know, once you see that and you sort of acclimatize to it,
yeah,
you just have to accept it. Like, you can look at something and say, this is perfect. I wish I could create something half as good. And there are people doing nothing but tearing that thing down. So,
yep.
I don't know. On the one hand, there's that. And on the other hand, you'll get 49 people who tell you they love whatever you did and one person who says they hated it, and you're going to focus on that one person. So
yes.
I think consciously I can learn that lesson, but subconsciously or unconsciously it doesn't matter, because I'm still going to fixate on that one bad review, and I'm sure you have that exact experience.
So spot on. I mean, it's so funny because it's not even like I've gotten like really positive reviews from like really respected critics, like that I really respect. But then like Sarah Jane 12 on Amazon would be like, this movie sucked, and I'm like, oh no, what did I do wrong? It's like, yeah, as you say, it's always what you're going to fixate on. And so, as I say, what I've started to come to realize now is that I'm like, okay, as you say, I can consciously say that I don't care what people think, but that's why I also don't read reviews anymore.
Okay. I wasn't going to go there, because if you had a different opinion, I didn't want to try to change it. But yes, my personal way of coping is to not read reviews or comments or whatever. And in a way, it really does suck, because I would love to read obviously positive comments, but also constructive ones. If I get something wrong and someone tells me, that is genuinely helpful to me. But this thing sucks, I hate it, delete this, like those are not helpful comments.
They can't help you in any way.
And those are the ones you'll remember. And so yeah, I stopped reading.
To answer your question from a little bit back, it's very easy to pinpoint my favorite horror movie, which is Hellraiser.
Hellraiser. Good choice. Yeah.
That is just my all-time personal. I have a lot of other ones that it's funny because you mentioned The Thing. The Thing to me is another near perfect movie. And the original Halloween as well, because it was probably one of the first. Well, no, it wasn't, because I saw Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 5. I snuck in behind the couch. My grandmother, my mother, and my aunt were watching it, and I snuck in behind the couch and watched it and didn't sleep for like 5 weeks.
That movie, yeah. And probably the sequels too. Like, I can't vouch for that because I grew up. But like, if you catch one of those movies when you are a little kid, it doesn't let go.
No, definitely not.
It's so funny watching them now, especially like the later Nightmare on Elm Street films, where Freddy Krueger is a clown, basically. He's wisecracking. But yeah, he terrified me as a kid.
Oh, big time, same. And like, I think I often say that the reason I'm so drawn to horror, the reason I'm so fascinated by horror, is because I'm like chasing that rush of me being 5 behind the couch that I'll never probably experience again. Like that was probably the most scared I'll ever be, unless something actually genuinely traumatic happens. Then yeah, fair enough.
Well, let me. I know you kind of answered, but I want to put you on the spot here. Have you come close to that in your adult life? Like, has there finally been a movie? Maybe it didn't hit you quite as hard, but you did get a little bit of that. I don't know, that haunting again.
I'm trying to think, because I know there's the thing that really gets under my skin is like, I don't know, what's the name? Oh Christ! Why is it not coming to me? The Jack Ketchum, not the woman, but is it the girl? The girl next door. Just a really.
I think I know the movie you mean. Yeah.
Just like, it wasn't quite what you'd like call, I guess, torture porn. Like, but it was. Yeah. It was just brutal. to a point that was I could, in a weird way, I could still look at it and say, well, that's an incredibly well-made movie. Like, it wasn't like some of these other ones where I'm like, well, that was garbage, but it had loads of gory bits in it or whatever. It was like, no, this was a well-made movie, but it made me absolutely sick to my core, and I don't think I could ever watch it again. And I find that those are the ones that hit me nowadays a lot more than, like, I don't think I've seen a slasher or a monster movie or anything in, you know, the last decade or two. Well, actually, Korean cinema in the mid-2000s was one that really got to me. A Tale of Two Sisters is a Korean movie that I saw that, like, really just really made me quite scared. Maybe probably close enough to what I was watching Nightmare on Elm Street, because there's a scene in a bed, and it got under my skin so much that was kind of one of the key moments when we were coming up with the Parish, my own movie, that, like, immediately the first thought that came into my head was, like, beds. There's something about beds, and maybe that's Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe it's A Tale of Two Sisters, all these things, all these influences coming together. But it was like, yeah, you're supposed to be safe in your bed, and when you're not safe in your bed, that makes me very uncomfortable.
I think that's pretty fair. God, yeah, I've never seen. I've never heard of Tale of Two Sisters. I'll have to look that up. I haven't seen The Girl Next Door. I think that's the title. But are you aware that is based on a true story? So I read about the actual events, and I didn't read I don't know, like a really long book about it that would have provided so much information and detail. I read, you know, the Wikipedia summary, and that was enough. That, like, you know, God. So I can't even imagine seeing any of that dramatized.
It's one of those things that, like, I go to a lot of horror festivals here in the UK and stuff, and you see a lot of stuff, and you're kind of, you know, I guess in a weird way kind of desensitized to a lot of stuff, like, as in, especially at those festivals, it's all about everybody cheers when the cheerleader gets her head cut off or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, nobody's scared by that stuff anymore, or maybe they never were. I don't know. I think when we were all kids, we were probably all cheering at that stuff as well, in Friday the 13th or whatever. But yeah, it's when you're at one of those festivals and you see something like, you know, that Girl Next Door. I'm trying to think of examples of that. I guess one that was really good was I thought it was really good. It was very divisive. It was called What Keeps You Alive. It was by a guy named Colin Minahan, who did a film called It Stains the Sand Red as well. Like, he's done a lot of these kind of indie horrors. But What Keeps You Alive to me was, like, again, it was that kind of, it just kind of got in under the surface a little bit and made me very uncomfortable. And as I say, that's where I'm more living now as a horror fan, is trying to find stuff that will really pull me out of my comfort zone, because I'm so used and so desensitized to all the other stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you love horror, or probably a lot of different genres, but when you love horror, you want more of it. So you seek it out and you watch more of it. You become familiar with it, which is all good, except for the fact that it does kind of it robs it of its power in a lot of cases, because you'll see something that's a good movie, but it's not as scary as Friday the 13th. Or it was a good movie, but it's not as good as The Thing. You know, so when you have those points of comparison, it gets a lot harder, I think, to exceed your expectations.
And then as well, I think one thing that horror has, I've noticed this a lot in recent years, even with watching the trends of movies that are coming out and stuff, is nostalgia is more powerful, I think, in the horror genre than in any other genre that I can think of. Because, like, everybody pines for that, you know, Friday the 13th, the 80s aesthetic, right. Stranger Things is booming now. You know, everybody just suddenly, I know it's probably the 80s in general, but I think a lot of it is horror. I think people long for that, like, they remember those feelings of, like, being scared behind the couch, and they're like, I want to go back to that. I want to, you know.
Yeah, and I think that actually it works in a thematic sense. It works really well with horror, because you do have things like, whether it's Freddy Krueger or it's Chucky or it's Godzilla, like, just the fact that these things keep coming. You know, you even it, you know, with the break between chapters, you can, I don't want to say you can stop it, but basically you can bring things back to some level of calm. But there's no telling, you know, when it's going to come back. There's no telling if you're going to succeed at ever sealing this demon away. So yeah, the more recent Halloween film that came out, and then they're doing 2 more sequels to that.
Yeah.
I think it kind of works because Michael Myers is supposed to be this unstoppable force, whereas I don't
Exactly.
know,
Yeah.
like nostalgia probably doesn't work as well for drama, because if you can have a really good dramatic film about your daughter dying of cancer, and then like 20 years later your daughter isn't going to come back and die of cancer again. So
Yes.
you
No, it's yeah.
it doesn't really work in that sense. If you thought it was sad the first time, wait till you see her die this time. um, but with horror, like, yeah, why the hell not? Chucky's back, here he is.
Yeah.
He's still a little bastard.
So before I get to my final question, where should people stay tuned for information about the book's release?
You'll have 2 options. You can go to bossfightbooks.com, which is obviously the publisher's website, and you can go to noiselesschatter.com, which is my website. And I think you mentioned it, that you had seen one of my posts about it.
Yeah.
I'm posting a lot of behind the scenes sort of articles in the meantime, basically because I wrote a book and the book is there and I hope people enjoy it. But the book has one purpose, and along the way, I discovered and experienced a few things that I thought were kind of cool from a writing perspective. So I'm just giving a little bit of behind the scenes information right now, and I'll do that right up through release.
As I said to you earlier, I came across one of your articles where you were talking about the experience of getting the voice actor behind Barry Burton and how challenging that was because of the fact that he had basically become a meme. Like everybody just made fun of his performance. And what's funny is until I read your article about that, that was me. I was always, Jill Sandwich this and Master of Unlocking that. And like never once thinking that like I never checked and saw what that dude had done next. And then once I read your article and looked at his like what he's done on IMDb, I'm like, holy crap, this dude is a phenomenal voice actor. Like,
oh God, yeah. It's well, let me say one thing. That's fine. You can laugh at the Jill sandwich and all that stuff because it's legitimately bad, and that's the writing. So I think we're okay on that. But the fact is, I'll take a step back for context for the listeners. Like he deliberately removed himself from the internet. He took down his personal website. Like he does not have a web presence. He still works, but that's it. He does not respond to messages. He doesn't read anything. And the reason for that isn't because you made a Jill sandwich joke, I promise. It's because there were people who would, actively seek him out. And I don't want to say like bully him or torment him, but it was cruel. It was deliberately cruel, as opposed to you making a funny joke for people to laugh at. People would seek him out and say like, "Oh, you ruined Resident Evil. The game was perfect except for you."
Oh my God!
Yeah, like it gets to him. He's an old man.
Jesus,
he's the sweetest guy. And well, you'll see in the book, but I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say he read a script that someone handed him. He was paid to read those lines.
Yeah,
and he did it. So. Like, do the lines suck? Yes, period. No room for discussion there. But this guy didn't ruin Resident Evil. And the way
all of the voice acting was so bad. So how could you say that this dude did with everybody across the board? And it's not even the voice acting, as you say, it's their reading terrible dialogue.
Yeah.
It's worse than if you ran something through Google Translate now and just what comes out.
It was awful, yeah. Like they were given bad lines. I don't think there's any room for argument there. He's paid to just read, and then in addition, an actor, whether a voice actor or not, an actor is really only like half the equation. The rest of it is the direction. What is the director telling them to do? And in his case, this is a slight spoiler for the book, but it goes into much more detail. In his case, he came in and he read a few Barry lines, to be recorded, and he's waiting for the director to give him some guidance, gruffer, angrier, be afraid. And the director gave him nothing. So, that's literally all he could do was out loud read the words on the page. So if that performance sucks, which I think it's okay to say that, it's not really a reflection on him.
Yeah,
he didn't have anything to work with. Bad lines and no direction. Especially
when you factor in as well, I think what a lot of people neglect to think about when they think back to Resident Evil 1, it is terrible, and it is, like the stuff, the performances and all that. Not the performances, the writing, everything. But the thing is, how many things were voiced at that time? You know what I mean? Like, it was such a new medium. That's what I think. I at the time was blown away by the fact that they were speaking. I didn't care that it sounded like that. I just was like, oh my god, these characters are talking. That's phenomenal. Like, I just come to play Sonic 3 and Knuckles,
Yep, you're exactly right. That was the novelty. I remember around that time, Mario 64. Maybe, I don't know if it was a couple years earlier or what, but like the fact that Mario would say "woohoo" as he jumps around, that was enough. That was incredible. So for Resident Evil to have fully voiced dialogue, that at the time, that was fine. That was its own novelty. And then as the years went by and people realized, okay, it's kind of crappy dialogue, I think that's when that's when the tide turned a little bit.
Looking back on it, it's like, it's like when you look back at B movies from the 50s and 60s, radioactive ant movies from that time or whatever, like it's very easy to say that they're rubbish and they're garbage or whatever, but like they're a product of their time and they're enjoyable in their own way. And like, it's funny, I can forgive all of the voice acting, and I cannot wait to get your book because you have to have covered this. If you didn't, I'm going to be so angry at you. I could forgive every single bit of the voice acting. What I cannot forgive is that in the director's cut, how bad the soundtrack is in the director's cut at points.
Oh God. It's okay. Actually, this is another one of those things where I can respond in so many ways. But I will say, you're only slightly incorrect. The soundtrack for the director's cut DualShock version really sucks.
Yes.
But if you get your hands on just the director's cut, it's awesome. So, like, that is the way to play the game.
I do. I have I should have copped that properly because I have the director's cut, like the proper director's cut.
Right.
But yeah, it's the director's cut DualShock version. Those trumpets, man, those friggin' trumpets in the basement. They haunt me to this day. That's the true horror of Resident Evil right there.
Rightly so. Throughout the book, I do discuss the differences between Biohazard and Resident Evil and the director's cut and the DualShock version, but I don't go into too much detail. I did end up playing the DualShock version front to back. I think I did both Jill and Chris. I can't say for sure, but I know I played that one front to back just to kind of refresh my memory. And I don't know if I'm happy that I did that, but I did it. Yeah, that soundtrack is unfortunate.
It's painful. I'm currently doing something similar at the moment in that I'm not. It's nowhere near as bad. It's nowhere near as bad as playing the DualShock version. I'm just currently playing Resident Evil 1.5, Biohazard 1.5, which is the unfinished Resident Evil 2. But it's so hard to know because like the version that I'm playing is the one that's apparently 70% complete, but then people are like 30% of that was made by fans because only 40% was ever released by and I'm like, I don't care, I'll just play it. Like, I don't care about all this additional nonsense. I just want to check it out. I don't care how much was made by fans. I like fan games as well, so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yes, I guess if fans contributed to it and filled in some gaps, it muddies the waters a bit, but it's a piece of history and it's really cool to experience. In the book, not in the final version because it was a bit too much of a digression, but I was going into the Game Boy Color port of the first game.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, I think that's probably around 90% complete. It's definitely not complete, but I think it's pretty darn close. But it's fascinating. And the reason it didn't end up in the book is because, well, there's not too much to say about it, but experiencing it was a really cool, piece of alternate history. I can't imagine being a kid with a Game Boy Color and getting a copy of Resident Evil. That would have been revelatory.
I played like a demo version of Resident Evil 2 on Game Boy Advance. And again, I was looking at it going, like, if this had come out it would have blown every other Game Boy Advance game out of the water, like, because it looked like Resident Evil 2. Like, okay, it was like a little bit whatever, but like it hit it pretty damn close for a system that was sporting about, I don't know, 6 megabytes of storage space on the cart, like 8, 12, I don't know.
Not much, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, gonna finish out this interview with you, Phil, by asking you, how would you personally rank the Resident Evil series? Your own personal, like, this is completely subjective, not objective.
Okay. I'll probably have to ignore most of the spin-offs because there are way too many and I will forget a bunch of them. So at the very top, it's got to be the remake of Resident Evil 1.
Yes.
Followed by, I know, that is the right answer. So, followed probably by the original Resident Evil 2. Then the remake of Resident Evil 2. We'll put that there. Revelations 1. Or maybe 4. Let's do 4 and then Revelations 1. Then the original 3. Revelations 2. 0. And then probably 7, 5, and 6. I'm sorry. I don't hate 6. But I would probably put it at the bottom.
That's totally fair. I'm a little shocked that 7 was so low, but as I say, it's a subjective list. It's not an objective list.
Oh yeah, and like I did mean what I said. I don't think 6 is a terrible game. Like every one of those games has some redeeming factors. 7, I think, is a genuinely really good game. Overall, I'd probably rank some other things higher, as you saw, but like that's not me saying 7 is inferior. That's me saying, oh my God, these other ones are even better.
On your personal, exactly. But as well as that, I mean, it's always a hard one for me, right? Because the one that always, even though, right, when you said Resident Evil 1 remake, I'm like, that is the right answer. That is the number one. Like that.
It's gotta be.
But the funny thing is, like, if I was doing the list myself, it would probably be the original Resident Evil 3 because I have this weird connection to it that I love that game so much. And I think there was 3 games I played to death on the PlayStation 1, and they were Resident Evil 3, Final Fantasy 7, and Metal Gear Solid. And I feel like those 3 games colored the rest of my gaming history since then. So even though I know that on an objective level, Resident Evil 1 Remake is a better game, I would probably still just immediately default to Resident Evil 3.
Yeah, the power of nostalgia. But yeah, if you played 3 games over and over and it was those 3, you did pretty good for yourself.
I like to think so. I mean, I think that when you think of that generation, those were 3 really iconic experiences. And now we've had, a Resident Evil remake, we've had a Final Fantasy VII remake. So if we could just get that Metal Gear Solid remake, although then again, Konami aren't doing nothing like that.
I know, yeah. You really you set yourself up for disappointment with that.
Yeah, big time. Philip, I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing the show with me. It's been great
thank you for having me.
It's been just so much fun to talk. Honestly, part of the reason that I set up this whole channel was I wanted to meet other people who shared my passion and love for survival horror and horror in general. And so it's been just brilliant to talk to you about these games, about movies, about everything. And I really look forward to checking out the book. I'm super happy that I have it backed. And I hope other folks follow my lead and throw a couple of quid and back it because I just think that there's some really good stuff in that collection, especially. Like, if you look at it, your favorite game of that era is in there somewhere. Trust me, in those book collection.
It's a lot, a lot of good games.
Get Philip's one.
Right, definitely start with mine. But if you're going to buy 2, you've got a lot to choose from.
But yeah, no, I genuinely thank you so much, and everybody check. There'll be links in the description where you can go and check out the Kickstarter, and also Philip's. I will put that in there as well. And yeah, thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you for having me.
And as always, guys, let's survive together, and peace out.